Last summer, when Senator Mike Lee proposed a mass sale of federal public lands, we learned two important things. First, we were reminded that there is a firmly entrenched group of politicians and policymakers in Washington, D.C. and beyond, with increasing influence and an unending desire to see our federal public lands either sold off, transferred, or otherwise milked for every dollar they're worth. And secondly, and I think of equal importance to remember, is that we learned that when Americans of all types stand up and speak out in a big, loud way across the rural-urban divide, from right to left and everywhere in between, when we unify across our different interests, hunters and anglers, campers and climbers, and so many other types, and demand that our public lands be protected and stewarded for future generations, when we do that, we can, in fact, make a difference. And last summer, we did it. We stopped the sale. Together. The question now is, how can we do that again? My guest today is someone that I believe can help us answer that question. Fitz Cahall is a climber, skier, and outdoor adventurer of all types, and the founder and host of the Dirtbag Diaries, arguably the most influential and beloved podcast in the outdoor adventure community. Through the Dirtbag Diaries and other projects he's worked on through his company Duct Tape and Beer, Fitz has become one of the foremost voices and advocates for public lands within that community. I've invited Fitz to join me here today to explore his personal journey from outdoor adventure to advocacy, and to brainstorm about the awesome potential there seems to be for the hunting and fishing community and the outdoor adventure community to further unite in defense of our public lands. Thanks for joining me. This is Future Wild, presented by Conservation First Bank. Fitz Cahall, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, I'm psyched to be here. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Mark.
Of course. I've followed your story for, I guess it's almost 20 years now, Fitz. And I know that you started the early days of your outdoor life with a certain sense of freedom, with a certain sense of, ability to go and do whatever you wanted in the outdoors, in the wild, chasing these things. And then at some point, you had kids, you had a family, and that changed things, at least to some degree. And I wanted to start here because, and it might seem kind of an odd place to start, but I wanted to start here talking about your family, because when I had kids and when I had a family, it changed for me so much. It changed not just how I recreated in the outside and how I went on outdoor adventures, but also how I thought about the future of these places and these things. So I'm just curious, Fitz, if you could walk me through what that evolution was like for you, going from someone who is a solo adventurer out there chasing goals in these big wild places to then eventually having a couple little ones following you and your wife around, and how that shifted both what you did and how you felt about it all.
Well, Mark, now I'm chasing them, which is even crazier. It's like it's the tables have turned. Yeah, no, it's so funny. I mean, I have very clear memories of that moment in time, that sort of transitional moment of going from, having Becca and I, we were incredible adventure partners together. And then, we weren't sure. Starting a family wasn't something we were like 100% sure of when we got married and when we went through that process. And I think through time, we worked through that understanding of like, this is something we want to do together. This is the next chapter. And I remember, like, especially like kind of in the months leading up to our first son, so many people being like, it's going to change your life. And I'm really like, duh, of course. Like, it's like, I'm not an idiot. Like change is constant. And I think that was something that I very much was like ready to embrace and ready to grow as a person for it. Like on that level, I felt like I wasn't one of those people that's like, oh, it's going to change nothing. I was like, clearly this is going to change who I am, and it's completely altering my course through adventure and through my career, but I had the sense that like I wanted that because I felt like it was going to be grounding in a way that would be really powerful. And it, of course, was all that. And it's, for us, it wasn't some, I mean, there certainly was like one day we had a, empty house and one day we had a kid in it. That for sure happened. But our evolution wasn't like, it wasn't just like before and after. Like there was a lot of, I think the 10 years after, I did a lot of incredible things. I got to go on a lot of incredible adventures. I got to work on a lot of incredible projects where it very much felt very real and alive. And like on a lot of levels, it still does that. I still feel like I'm going and doing things that challenge me. I'm getting to go kind of follow my curiosity to the forests and into the mountains. And it's not as much as it used to be, but it's still very much a part of my life. Yeah. And it's interesting too, because like I hear that. Like I think sometimes when you have kids, it gives you a sense of like, I need to look further ahead, right? And like sometimes it's on the level of being like, oh man, I need to save for retirement, right? Like it happens in different ways. And I think that I definitely already, before we had kids, I definitely kind of had that sense of there's something deeper, and I've derived so much joy. It's like my career is based upon public lands, my joy, who I'm friends with, like all these things. Like it was all, my life unfolded in these places, like on a deep, deep level. And they were so intertwined that I think even before having kids, like I had a sense that at some stage I was going to need to evolve into an advocate for these places. And that was something that I was like, I'd read enough. I'd read enough about whether it was even just as far back as like Teddy Roosevelt or John Muir, and realizing like they started in really similar situations where they were just passionate about the craft of being outdoors. I mean, for Roosevelt it was being a hunter, and for Muir it was being a climber, and kind of like a original dirtbag in a lot of ways. And so I think that through my understanding of the history of climbing and the history of the outdoors and sort of modern recreation, like I understood that this was a part of the whole thing, and that at some stage that would be, it would be like a joyful responsibility to do that. And I think it happened maybe a little bit earlier in my life than I thought it would, just because of the nature of what was happening in our world between the sort of just the clear reality that the public lands were just in a bullseye target for some of for some politicians and corporations, essentially. And so I think that pulled me in earlier than I thought I would, and it felt right. Like I feel really proud of it now as a dad, where our kids see it. They see us like shouldering that responsibility, and they ask about it, and they get it. And so for me to be able to like pass that on, almost sort of like osmosis, really, because it's just part of our life. It's a cool thing that I think that they get to see. So
Yeah.
I feel like I don't know. It's such a big question, because I'm like, on one hand, it's like this responsibility, but it's also this gift that has ended up in my life.
How have you handled that? Sharing this with your kids. Like it's one thing to introduce your kids to the outdoors and make them feel capable and competent out there and have fun. Like that's obviously a huge part of that journey. But then that second part, that kind of shift from just being a user to being a contributor or an advocate or just caring.
Yeah.
I've thought a lot about this over the last 8 years as a dad, where I'm torn. On one side, I want my kids to understand what's going on to some degree, and I want them to have like a growing conservation ethic themselves. I'm hoping to instill these same ideas in them. But then on the other hand, I'm also worried, like I don't want to fracture their youth with too much worry or with too much of this this heaviness that I think some of us feel when we consider the future. I also want them to just have that pure joy of the outdoors, right? How have you attacked that? How have you addressed that?
Yeah, it's a great question, because like I think there are so many like between the tax on public lands and certainly like it's like I don't know about how it is for where you live, but we have smoke season, right? And to sort of explain to your kids, like, this wasn't really a thing 10 years ago or 20 years ago. This wasn't really part of our world. And so they're going to have questions about that kind of thing. And I think as they age, I become more and more just very open about how I feel about it. But I also think it's like, kids deserve to be young. Like, kids deserve to get to have that experience of like unfettered joy and wonder. And it's like, I think that I work really hard to give that to them. And I think even as young adults, like it's, I think it's like, I think even our younger, like the younger people in our community, like they deserve to go and have fun, and they deserve to go and have these experiences. And, I think for us, it's like, I hope with the kids, like, that I teach them there is a pathway into this, and there is I think we ride mountain bikes a lot too. We climb, we backpack, we do river trips, we, do a lot of different things, but a lot of times we during the summer, we mountain bike. And in that mountain biking community, there's often like this sort of like, no dig, no ride. And the idea is that you got to help maintain the trails or help build the trails. You have to put in the sweat equity in order to really feel like you're a part of the whole thing.
Love that.
And so it's like, that's like a really simple way for me to bring the kids into that idea of like, hey, this stuff doesn't exist without us as a community working together to make sure that it is cared for. And that's a great, like, they don't have to go to Washington, D.C. Like, that's mom's job. She can go lobby Congress in Washington, D.C. That doesn't need to be their job right now. But for them to be like, oh, I pick up a shovel and I put in time and I do this thing, that's like a key. I just feel like that's a great way to facilitate that. So that's kind of how we've been handling that. And, I worry about that. Like, I worry sometimes about like the heaviness of some of the things surrounding this world, but like, I also can't control that. And, it's like, it's one of those things that this world is a little bit chaotic right now, and they feel it and they understand it. But at the same point, they can just kind of check out, and I see them go to the park. I see them go skiing. I see them and they're just lost in it. And that, I kind of have faith in that, I guess.
Yeah. I think that's so key is making sure that real connection to these places or these activities, like that is like jet fuel, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when you're out there in the mountains, whether you're hiking or hunting or fishing or climbing, whatever, like that just fills you up with this joy and this love. And I think that's what then leads to people, having enough, give a shit to then do something about it. Totally. So you got to start 100%. There. And then to your point, demonstrate.
And I think the awesome part about it too is like knowing that those kids like natively will like be like, oh, I love this thing and I'm lost in it and I'm just present. Like, as an adult, like that's awesome to sort of realize like, I need to tap back into that. I need to tap back into that joy. I need to tap back into those experiences so that I have like my head on tight. Like, I'm ready to do all the things, to do all the adulting, but then also like I'm ready to kind of just get to work and lend my voice to the things I care about, and, get through my job and, do all the things and show up. So it's like, it's awesome because I feel like the kids have been this really good, like reminder to just go, for us, it's like, oh man, my eldest kid is like, I've ridden mountain bikes for a long time, and I'm not always like been the person that's like wants to go hit gap jumps or big jumps. And he's really good. He's really good in the air. And like, at some point he's like, Dad, you got this. And I was like, and we kind of made a pact. It was like, okay, if you go ride longer trails and like steeper, kind of like more technical things, and you like, let me teach you how to do that, I will let you teach me how to go and hit these jump lines. And that's like an amazing thing to kind of like give yourself over, to be like, okay, here's, at that time I would have been like, here's my 10-year-old towing me. I'm following my 10-year-old down, and he's just being like, you got this, Dad. And to do that, like, that's an awesome thing. And in those moments, like, my worries about this world, about the things I care about, they go away. And that's a gift. That is a gift to be able to have that.
Yeah, that's incredible. I want to rewind a little bit to something you said a few minutes ago. You talked about how you, through some of your reading and through some of your kind of your own personal explorations, you kind of struck upon some of this history of how we got these public lands and these opportunities, and that led you down that kind of advocacy journey. Could you unpack that a little bit more and kind of walk us through what that evolution was for you? Because as a consumer of Dirtbag Diaries over the years, I remember early on it was very focused on the experience, right? There was all these great stories about your experiences and other people's experiences outside. And then at some point over the last 10 years, give or take, I started noticing more of these episodes where you guys were talking about endangered spaces and these different public land issues. And of course, on social media, I think we've seen that, become an increasing focus for you guys. What was that trajectory like for you, and how did your thinking evolve over that period?
Yeah. It's a really good, that's a good question. I think for me, one, it started diving into the history. There were, from my side, there were like two people that I thought were pretty interesting in terms of the history of climbing, and they were John Muir and they were David Brower, and to even an extent like someone like Yvon Chouinard. I think there was this lineage, and I saw that, and I was fortunate to spend a lot of time in collaborating with Patagonia for many, many years. So I had someone who was very much alive and at the thick of it to like look up to, right, at that during that part of my career, and that was really cool. And at that stage too, it was also like you could pick up the phone and be like, Yvon, like, tell me about this route. I want to I know you did the first ascent of it 30 years ago. It was like still possible, right? To have
That's pretty sweet.
It was like a different chapter in the outdoor industry too. I kind of Becca and I ended up taking this trip through the Sierra, and our idea was like a lot of climbers, they hate. I don't feel like this is the way in the hunting community. I feel like you guys are really good about it. But like a lot of climbers, they complain about the approaches. Like they want to just do the climbing, and they're like, God, the approach, the hike through the mountains, it's so long. And I'm like, I got to the stage where I was like, I like it all. Like I'm into this. The approach is like, this is great. And so we set up this trip where we walked from the southern end of the Sierra to the northern end of the Sierra. And there, of course, is the John Muir Trail that goes to the heart of the Sierra. And because a lot of people hike that, a lot of people hike the PCT, there's like ways you could stash. Like we had friends and rangers, that were rangers that up at the high camps and stuff like that. So we figured out, let's just spend basically a good chunk of the summer and never come down. Like it was like the approach is the good part. We'll just keep approaching. We'll carry all the climbing gear. We'll like resupply out there. And it was really cool because like not only had John Muir done that route essentially, and that would become the John Muir Trail, but so had David Brower, who was, one of the key leaders in the Sierra Club and just a incredible advocate for the conservation of lands. And no matter how you feel about the Sierra Club, I think there's a lot of places that David Brower helped preserve that I think we're all really grateful for these days. And so David Brower had also taken a similar trip where he like did, over 6 weeks, like I think he like did 54 new routes, which is insane. And it was like a different time, different chapter. I was like, that's so burly. And Beck and I, we kind of just did that trip, and it was like full adventure. It wasn't necessarily like this is for a cause or anything like that. It was just like us to have this experience. And that was a really impactful thing for me, where just to even think about following in the footsteps of other people that had managed to, turn their passions for climbing into something deeper. And I think that carried through. For me, it was the need. I think that I saw a need, and I think that was where some of the shifts happened. Is that we realized that we had a unique sort of understanding of what was going on. Becca actually worked for the federal government for doing wildlife studies for many years. She worked in birds, and she worked in forest ecology and how salvage logging after big fires. She had a lot of experience working with the Forest Service before she ended up running our business and with universities. And we realized that there was a certain point where it's like we had the background. There weren't that many people doing it. It wasn't to say we were alone, but like there was this moment where we realized, we can offer a service like through our reporting, through our work. We know all these people. We understand the issues. We understand the sort of policy behind it. And that was a moment where we realized, like, when you say to yourself, wouldn't it be nice if this thing existed? And that's like, and then when you have the skills, you're kind of like, oh, I am that person right now.
Right.
And that very much in kind of like the middle of the last decade was that awakening of being like, oh, we are these people. We are the ones that are going to, inside of our community, we're going to have to start leading around this for our generation and for the younger generation. And we just started doing it in the best way possible. Or like sorry, I should retake that, like to say that we did it in the way that we could do it the best we could, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't perfect and we didn't get it right all the time, but that was okay. Like we just started somewhere, and it was incredible. We got to, work on some of the national monuments, and like one of my favorite moments I think was when there was the debate and the rollbacks of Bears Ears happened. That landscape and how it was funded and how it was cared for was really in limbo because of like budget reasons, all these things. It's like, and at the same time, all this attention had been brought to it. So there was increased visitation, and there was this, clear need that there needed to be a visitor center. That wasn't going to happen anytime soon from the federal government. And so we just worked with people on the ground there, and then the broader community, and then with foundations. And we ended up raising, I think it was like $850,000. Part of it from Kickstarter, like the whole team. And there's an education center now that's been built without the federal government, that in a lot of ways is a sort of de facto, almost like guerrilla style visitor center for this national monument. And so there were just, I think that there were these doors that would open and we would just walk through them. And that's how it happened. And today it's really like, I was talking to someone about this recently, is like, there are so many more people doing the work we were doing 10, 12 years ago. And it's awesome. Like it really, truly is awesome. And cause like if I didn't have to be on social media, I would not. Like at this stage, I've been doing that for a long, long time. I've been there since the beginning on a lot of these. Like I had a MySpace account, when I started. Like this was like
Tom was your first friend,
dude,
right?
Yeah, Tom was my first friend. Exactly. Like I've been doing this a long time. I could live without it, and I certainly could like live without getting in front of the iPhone camera and like ranting. Mm-hmm. I'd be fine without that. And it's so cool to see that there are so many people doing that work right now and doing it really well and doing it really thoughtfully. And it doesn't, it's great to see. Like, I just think that, that was one of our goals, was to elevate public lands and to elevate this idea that as a user group, we have responsibilities. And I think, it's actually funny because I feel like in a lot of ways, I feel like that's existed a little bit more in the hunting and angling community than it necessarily has in my community, or it's just it's just been built into it, partially because you guys pay taxes to fund so much of the work that gets done to support hunting and fishing, and we haven't traditionally, right?
Yeah.
Like our industry proper hasn't traditionally. So I think that was like a lot of times I would look over at the hunting and fishing community and be like, we've got some work to do over on our side. And that's something that I can help with and kind of bring people forward.
Yeah, and I've noticed that same thing, that it seemed like the broader outdoor rec community was a little bit, with obvious exceptions to this, there was some like reticence to like dive in wholeheartedly on a lot of this stuff until, that Bears Ears example was maybe one of those points where it really started to pick up steam, and then ever since then. What would you attribute either that trend more broadly to the fact that there's this growing willingness to participate and to activate, and or what has been kind of what's worked for you guys? I guess this is a two-part question. Number one, what has worked from your end? And then number two, why do you think this has spread beyond just you guys?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great question. I think that I don't want to crap. I'm gonna get in trouble here, but I'm gonna go for it. And like I'll kind of like poke at my own community and more in the history, because I think it has improved a lot. But I do think that there was like this side sometimes, especially in the climbing world, where it was like, oh, we have this deep relationship to the landscape, and then like they would sort of think that it was like so special and unique to like climbers, and you're like. And I remember falling into that way, way back, like when I was like really young, like 19 or 20. I think like, oh, it's just like, oh my, I'm so deep. Like, oh, it's amazing. Such a deep connection, man. It's like no one else has this. And it was like this weird thing because there was this disconnect. And then a lot of times there was just this sort of hunger to keep doing the same thing over and over again to maintain that connection. But then it was like, what does it actually really mean to be connected? And I think that started to happen more kind of like in from 2014, I'd say, to 2018. I think that really kind of like people started to wake up that it's like, there are a lot of people that are connected, and like this whole like idea of being more connected because you climbed harder or higher or further away from, like, it's baloney, right? And I think we kind of woke up to that. And I think a lot of people, that was pretty cool. Like I think that in the snow sports, certainly like Jeremy Jones, like he took on climate change, and that was like, he felt this responsibility, I mean, of doing that, and he did it. And that was really cool. And I think that you also saw some of the people in the actual industry side, like you did see people you saw REI and you saw Patagonia kind of step up in that 2016, 2018 era when the sort of Jason Chaffetz was threatening to sell public lands. Like you saw the industry sort of step up and be like, hey, Utah, if you're going to push for this, we're going to move our trade show out.
Yep.
And so that happened. And I think what I see happening now is like, which is awesome, is the community is not waiting for the industry. And frankly, that's good, because like movements are not led. Like the movements don't have corporate sponsors. Like I'm just going to be like blunt about that. That's the truth of the whole thing, is like we as a community do not need our brands to do it. It would be great if they step forward, but it's got to come from us, right? And I think that what happened is that we did see the brand step up. We saw some of our like athletes and sort of our legends step up and sort of shoulder some of that responsibility. In a lot of ways, that gave people a role model. And in truth, like maybe some of us are better at it than the brands too. It's like not as difficult. I don't have to worry about brand standards. I mean, I've got a small company, and it's kind of like, how do you feel about that? And like, I go to staff, I'm like, what do you think about this? And it's like, decisions made in 2 hours. And you're like, let's do it, And like somebody says, is this going to make us go broke? Are we going to like piss anyone off or like the wrong people? And we just do it. And that's like, there's a freedom into that. And I think that I think is what I've seen, is that I think that kudos to like a lot of the people in the outdoor industry that took risky decisions and stuck their heads out, like their necks out a little bit. And I'm sure that, I know that actually felt difficult and scary for those companies to do that 10 years ago. I hope they can do it again. I think some of them are. But I also feel like we've grown enough as a community that we don't need them, that we're going to do this anyway. And like, it's appreciated, especially and for like the not-for-profits, they've really helped. I mean, like all of our not-for-profits have strengthened. We have better like calls to action. We have better alerts of like when things are happening. Like all that is so much clearer, and it's easier for us to kind of to lead. And I don't know, I'm not as familiar with like the history of the hunting and angling community of like when that sort of kicked off and when that started to happen. But I think we had a good template. We had a good sort of like peer group to look at and be like, how do we emulate this? And I think we have gotten better at it. And now I do think it is, I think it's a good thing that's being led by the community and not the industry. And I mean, my hope would be that we can all, like industry, not-for-profits, community, individuals, that we could all kind of work together. And we've done it. There's been some great examples in the last like year. I think some really hopeful, good examples of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
How have you been filtering and processing all of the different things that come down the pipe? I find that's like one of the biggest challenges that I have, both personally, that just for myself to understand this, and then also, for our company, trying to help, how do we direct how MeatEater thinks about these things or speaks about these things. There's like a fire hose of news coming out, right? There's all these different things happening. And then, as of late, there's a lot of things that are impacting the resource, that are impacting public lands, right? And then there's this fine line I feel like you have to try to walk between taking it all in and giving it its rightful attention, while at the same time not giving in to first impressions, catastrophizing. Like if you make a big deal about every single thing, right, then it becomes nothing to anybody because there's too much. How have you been able to process it yourself and then figure out what is actually the most important? Where do we actually take a stand on something in one of those moments?
Yeah. No, I think what it is really interesting. There obviously was the Mike Lee moment that happened earlier this year, and the sort of push to include public land sell or basically like public land transfers in the budget bill, and that we could consider that the starting point, or we could look at it and be like, that may have been the high water mark in terms of us all collaborating. And I kind of think it was probably the high water mark of everyone being able to get together and do the same thing. Does it have to be that way? No, but I think it's like, that sounds sad, but I'm like, well, what worked about that, right? And the truth of it is that everyone has a piece of public land that they care deeply about, that they have like a core memory from, like a lot of times, like when I talk to people, it's like, dude, what's your core memory on public lands? And someone will just spit out this incredible story about connection, about being there with their dad or being there with their mom, or, some moment where they, maybe they proposed to their spouse or said, it's just like all these things, like people have incredible connections to these places, right? And what's happened since that public land sell-off sort of moment is that it's been divided up by landscapes. And that's really hard to address. And somebody who, say, is like from Minnesota, and I feel really grateful that through time, like I actually ended up getting to spend a fair amount of time in the Boundary Waters. Like it was totally by accident, but I'm not from Minnesota. Amazing place, like incredible. And it's like enjoyed by a lot of different types of people with different recreation interests and all that, and you look at that and it's hard. I think it's hard for somebody in, say, Washington State to be like, okay, there's the mining, Boundary Waters. Okay, that's, in principle, like I'm not for that, but it's like not really affecting my daily life. And so I think what's happened since that public land sale off, where we all like got together and did it, is that it's really been divided out landscape by landscape. And I think we need to come back and sort of say, no, let's agree on a few things. Let's agree that public land sales are bad. Maybe let's agree that while there could be some budget bloat for sure, maybe the institutions that are in charge of managing these are good things. Maybe we could agree that there's let's not have any more backroom deals between billionaires and corporations. Let's allow us into the process. Let's allow democracy to happen.
Keep
I think
public
those are
public land.
I think there's some things that we could probably all agree on, and let's argue about the rest later.
Yeah.
And we'll figure it out later, but let's find out what's core to all of us and activate around that, because that's what happened when we stood up and stopped the public land sell-off, is we were able to in unison, very organically agree that this was a bad thing. And so let's come back to what brought us together at that moment. And it's public land sales bad, not allowing public input bad, not listening to actual voters bad. And let's work from there. Because I think that those are unifying things that we can build an umbrella from. And I don't know. I think we can. I mean, honestly, I think public lands can be for a lot of states. I think in a lot of places in the U.S., I think public lands could be a top 5 voting issue, frankly put.
What's been the reaction you guys have felt from your community as you guys have increasingly spoke out on these things? And then even within your own personal community, as your friends and family have heard you talking more about this. I think a lot of people worry, if I start doing this, it's going to, be a problem at my business, or it's going to, cause controversy with my friends who vote differently, or whatever it might be. How have you handled that?
Yeah. I think it's great. I mean, I think that for us, like, so, with like the Dirtbag Diaries is a great example. Is it when we started being like, we need to talk about these things. We need to talk about what's happening on our public lands. We need to kind of like shine lights on this. Like, it wasn't met with complete enthusiasm. It wasn't like our audience was like, "Yay, I'm here for this." It was like, "Why don't stay in your lane?" Right? I think we've all heard that
for sure.
And I'm like, I guess like a side of it is it gets easier, and I try to listen to like when I'm with people that don't see eye to eye to me. I'm like, and part of my job is asking questions. So I'm happy to listen and I'm happy to like hear perspectives. And I think one thing we forget about at like on a societal level is that two things can be true at the same time. It's like like you can have this very clear experience with public lands and I can have this very clear experience. I can think about this way. You can think about it this way. And we might both be right.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I've just done this long enough that I have confidence in it. And I'm just kind of like, if this is how my company stumbles, so be it. Companies don't last forever, period. Like, it's just like that's a truth. So it's like, well, it's going to end some way and I'm going to like live this by my values. So I'm just going to do it. And that's fine. And once I got over that, it became easy. And I think that that's the hardest part for everyone, whether they're an individual or whether they're part of a company or whether they're part of a not-for-profit, is to just be like, once you start that first step, the second step gets easier. And you fall into it. You realize like, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm not going to be I'll be like an imperfect advocate. I'll regret a few things, but at the same point, like I am kind of following my values. And so I think it just got easier to do that. And I am not one of those people that is certain about their beliefs all the time. Like I can poke holes in my own arguments and I can see that. And I think that's one of the harder things is like in this world, this current media landscape, it sort of demands total commitment. There's not a lot of nuance. And I'm fortunately like with the Dirtbag Diaries and the reporting we do there, we get to do some of that nuance. Like we get to go talk to the people that are for mining in like a place like Oak Flat, Arizona, right? We get to go talk to the mayor of the town. We get to go to the Boundary Waters and talk to both sides of this whole thing. And I get to have that nuance on that show. And that's an awesome thing. In social, less so. You kind of come at you. It's like, it doesn't work on social. And that's sadly a bummer to me, but it's also just, I kind of had to get over that side of it. And I just try to, I'm sure some of my takes will appear to be very lukewarm later on in life, and that's okay.
Like that's part of life.
Yeah, it's part of life. I treat social media like a river. It's always moving. It's like, it's like, you just gotta, that water's gone. That water's down in the ocean now, and you're just like, this is where I'm at. I'm looking at the river right now, and it'll flow downstream.
So you talked a couple minutes ago about how you believe that public lands have the potential to be a top 5 type voting issue, at least in some portions of the country.
Yeah.
And how one of the unique things about last summer was how we were able to get almost everybody, anyone who had a connection to public lands, whether you hiked and climbed or hunt and fish or raft or whatever, everyone kind of stood together and said, hey, this is a horrible idea, right? And it's interesting that we have to flag that. It's interesting that was so unique that we point that out. I was like, oh, this is this one time that actually happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it seems like, just in my very personal example, right? I live in this world personally in which I hike and I backpack and my kid goes to a climbing gym and we love to, stand up paddleboard and do all these different things. And then we also hunt and we fish. And we've got all these friends that do similar things. But for some reason, a lot of times these two communities will say like the REI crowd, hiking, climbing, whatever, and the hunting and fishing crowd, we'll call it the Cabela's crowd. Sometimes there's this sense that we're other.
Mhm.
that we're different, or there's some tension there or some distrust there. And I've always looked at that as this massive missed opportunity in the
Mhm.
past and this massive positive opportunity for the future if we could find some ways to like do what you just said, like hold two things that might not be exactly the same, but understand that there's validity to these different viewpoints, there's validity to these different ways of engaging with the natural world, but there's also a lot of common ground there. Um, what's your take on this kind of seeming divide at times between these two communities, while at the same time the power when they come together, like we saw last summer? How do you feel about that?
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting because I know like behind the scenes, like there's a lot of people that would like us to work closer together. And and I think a lot of that behind the scenes work led to the be able to there to be collaboration in this key moment. And I like let me think about this for a second. Just like I guess I'm curious. Like I grew up fishing. I take my boys fishing like once or twice a year. I love it, even though there's like so many tangled knots. I'm just like, oh my god.
Yeah,
But I still love it,
too.
and the kids love it, right? But I'm not really immersed in that community by any means. I mean, it is just like we are. I don't know what the term for a Gumby fisherman would be, but we are that. um, and it like what is the hunting like what's the like let's hash it out. I mean, like, what does the hunting community and the fishing community think of, like, I'll say the helmet community or the REI community, like the mountain bikers and the climbers? Like, what do they think of us?
Okay. Yeah, this is good. Because I want to hear from you what you guys think about us. So I will assume that the stereotype, right? Everyone gets stereotyped and pushed into kind of an extreme caricature, maybe, of an assumption, which would be that the helmet crowd, the REI crowd, would be extremely urban, extremely far left, extremely anti-hunting because of like animal rights arguments and things like that. And so those cultural differences would be why I think there has been historically, from some parts of the community, like distrust in working together, because it's like, oh well, they're gonna someday, maybe they claim to be our friends right now, but actually they want to end hunting. Actually, they want to end your opportunity to do this thing or to own a firearm to hunt or whatever it might be. I think that set of beliefs, those cultural things, I think are probably what gives some people pause.
Yeah.
Now, what about on your end? When your
Yeah, I mean,
buddies
it's so interesting, right? Like, and this is not my. I mean, I think we're both talking in general terms here,
Yes,
right? Like, if
yes.
like I had
That's not my take.
can point. Yeah, I think sometimes our community looks at the hunting and angling community, and they impose a lot of the same sort of stereotypes about being like super conservative. Like they imagine somebody with a MAGA hat, and they imagine somebody that's like shooting beer bottles and leaving glass everywhere, right? And it's like they go in the same way to that sort of worst of the worst. I shouldn't even say that. Like, it's just a part. It's not even worst of the worst, but it's like they go to that same extreme and be like, man, I have nothing in common with that person. Right. That's where we go to, and we look at it of being like, I mean, like, even on a tougher level, there are a lot of people that do the type of recreation that are in big cities, and sometimes we're like, why are you rural people trying to impose like a lot of things on us? And like, we feel that way. Like, we feel somewhat conflicted about this. Is like, sometimes I think there is this gap between, like, sort of the coastal cities or like the big cities, and being like, why are you making it hard for me to do whatever, people in the rural world? And I'm sure you guys feel the same way.
Sure.
And it so I think that there is sometimes that we level the same stereotypes where we're like, okay, this person doesn't really care. They are, they're voting one way. They like aren't thoughtful. I mean, I think that's like this weird thing that we level at the hunting and angling community of like, it's some sort of like we're somehow maybe intellectually superior. Like, and I don't know if that's the case for you, but like, that's like frankly put like BS, but we come at it from that way. It's like somehow like we're just like communing with nature.
Right.
We're elevated. Like, oh, we do it the right way. And we have, I think sometimes we look at that and I think we have a little bit of a superiority complex, frankly. But that, and we create that we like create a narrative that fits that. And that's a shame.
Sure.
And that's not everyone, but I think that can be a shame.
I would say like that's actually the vast minority probably on both sides that force that viewpoint. And then at the same time though, there are also there's a bad apple example in any community, right?
Yeah.
Like there are people within the hunting and fishing community that could be that stereotype that you guys have of what a not a dirtbag, but like a hillbilly, whatever hunter who is just killing stuff to kill stuff and makes all the bad things, actually they truly are. There are some bad apples out there like that. And then there are some bad apples, I'm sure, in the REI crowd who are elitist, who have these, think they're better than everybody, the stuff you said, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
But
and why do we listen?
Majority,
and yet we listen to those two, or we put those two sides up on a pedestal. When in the fact that there's like this vast, like number of people that are willing to have like a conversation, that are like, that are like that are okay with this, that are like capable of seeing something from a perspective. It's like human nature is we look for threats and we find them and then we like sort of elevate them up. And yet I think my hunch would be that our communities they're like aren't threatening to one another. They're actually probably like pretty compatible.
Yeah.
But
I
we
think
tend to go one way, right?
What's that? I think that's like a negativity bias or something they call it. Like if there's 100 items and one of those items is bad, we will focus on the one that's bad and ignore the 99 that are good, right? That's just kind of like you 100%. Said, human nature.
Yeah.
So when it comes to this issue, though, I feel like there's so much overlap. There's so much that our communities have in common. There's so much that we like. Our shared values are, so aligned. Other than a handful of things that we might be doing a little bit different than this community. This community might do things a little bit different, and we engage in different ways. But we all care deeply about wild places, open spaces, wildlife, public lands. So to your point earlier, there's this huge opportunity if we could ever continue the trend of getting these two communities to not only be accepting of each other, but also be like, hey, let's talk and let's figure out how do we join forces more often, because we are heard when we stand together and we speak together in ways that on our own we might not be. And I'm curious from your perspective, Fitz, what do you think? What do you think the hunting and again, like I guess I'm curious on both sides here. Your community, the helmet crowd, what would put that community at ease more or help kind of grease the rails more to make this kind of collaboration more possible? I guess I'm looking for solutions here. Like, what are some of the ways that our communities can work together more? What makes that possible?
Well, I think I kind of come back to like earlier you asked, like, oh, we're kind of breaking down about how the outdoor industry slowly, found its voice, and then the outdoor community found its voice, and now that really the outdoor community is leading, which is an incredible moment, right? It's a cool thing. So I almost think it's like coming back to that. It's like maybe it just starts with having these conversations, right? And like engaging with these conversations and thinking to yourself, like, it probably just has to start on some individual level, right? And going from there. And it like life's busy. Like I mean, in a perfect world, like you would take me out hunting and I'd have enough time to go do that. And in a perfect world, I might take you out climbing, right? I might even just take you to like our urban climbing gym, right? And be like, look at all these people having fun and like, look what's going on. And this isn't frightening. This shouldn't be frightening to anyone, right? And I think that, there's not a lot of time, but I think that as we start to do this, I think it comes down to individuals, like, all companies, all not-for-profits, all movements are a collection of individuals. And so it is a sum of parts. And I'm a deep believer in that. So I think it's like we start by doing this, right? And then we go from, we get to the point where it's like, all right, let's talk more rock. And then we start doing things together. That's the next step. Let's go do something together. And it may not be able to ideally we'd start with like recreating together and like, showing each other like how we experience that. But like, maybe we can just like skip it. Maybe we can like go create like a shared level of action for something. The same way we just did for the public land sales. Like, let's go do that again. Like let's figure that out. And the more we do that, the more likelihood we have of building deeper relationships. And ultimately, this is what it's like. The individuals and then the individuals that build relationships are what power movements. They're what power communities, right? And so you got to go do something with it. Like one of the on a business level, a mentor was always just like, you can have the sweetest pitch in the world. You can make the most beautiful deck and you can, like just nail your presentation. And they're always like, just go, mountain biking or take your client skiing or doing all that. And it's like, right? It's like that level of like, that's going to matter more than any presentation ever. And like, that's kind of like a rule of business, right? Like people know that in sales, right? And I think the same thing is like, let's just go do something together because we'll build lasting bonds if we could do that. And that happens on an individual level, but it also means like as two separate industries, as two separate communities, let's go do something together because we'll start to build those bonds and they'll last a lot longer and they'll lead to more bonds. And that's what it is. So like we can, it's like starts with talking. Then it's like we get out of the talking and we start to go do something. And then we can talk again and then we can go do more and it'll build from there. And I think that ultimately is the template for moving forward of just figuring out how to go do something together. And I think we're set up well for that because we just went and did something together. And now we're set up well to go do something again. And we just got to go put the date on the calendar and make it happen.
And I think that's so true. And the word that jumps out to me as I hear you say all that, and what I think maybe a lot of this kind of can be distilled down to is simply trust. Mm-hmm. It comes down to trust. And you build trust through relationships, through shared experiences that lead to shared values or that expose and illuminate shared values. And then that trust is like that connective tissue that then allows you to build and build and build and do stuff that matters because you have that foundation. And so you're right. I hope that you're wrong about what you said 10 minutes ago, that being that the Mike Lee sale was the high point.
I hope I am too.
I hope that is not the case. I hope that was just a trust building moment for our communities that forms just a foundation. Yeah. And that because now we have something to point back to and say, hey, you know what? We had a set of shared values on this thing. And while we approach it maybe in different ways sometimes, we said, today I don't care. Today I'm going to go to the Capitol with you. And I might wear camo and you might wear tie-dye or whatever, but who cares? I might climb and you might fish or whatever, but who cares? We can trust that we both care about this core thing. And that's something worth celebrating and then building off of.
Yeah, totally. I have the saying, and trust equals wealth. And there are many different types of wealth in this world, right? Like there's obviously financial wealth. There's wealth of power. There's wealth of family and all these things, right? But it's like all wealth begins with trust. And if we want to be like a wealthy, broader outdoor community, it's got to start with that, right? And like that is 100% it. And it's funny. I was smiling because like, he's talking about like showing up at the Capitol building. I have a dear friend and he is a wicked, he owns a business. We recreate together. He's a, through life has been a very accomplished, very good climber. And he is, he grew up kind of raising animals. And at some point he became a vegetarian. And so he's like, he's a pescatarian, like he'll fish. But then oddly enough, he's like this amazing gear designer. And he owns this company. They design all sorts of crazy things for companies of all different shapes and sizes. But he's worked a lot in the hunting and fishing thing. And so he actually like has designed a lot of like badass outerwear for some of the hunting and fishing companies. And one of my favorite things is that Serratori is one of the raddest peaks on the planet. It's super gnarly. It is like, it's down in Patagonia. It's like a very coveted thing. And when he climbed that peak, he did it in all camo. And it was just like, man, it's like the gear, it's like, it's so funny how you realize like, oh yeah, it's camo, but it's like, it still works in both settings. And I think that's like a good thing is like, let's just, I think it's like, let's show up together. That'd be good.
Yeah. Yeah. And so to your earlier point, while life is busy, open invitation. If you ever want to go fishing or try hunting or something like that, you have an open invite to do something like that. There's something to be said about leading in publicly facing ways. So I'm game for that. Okay. And I also want to throw out one last, I guess, thought exercise for you as we look forward into the future. I think all of us who care about public lands and wildlife and the environment and these different things that we like to do, like right now, it feels like there's so much happening. There's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of concern about what's happening. But at the same time, we've just talked about like we're seeing these examples of our communities coming together. We're seeing both the hunting and fishing and the outdoor community in their own ways, finding their voice, finding, new ways to advocate for these things we care about. From that perspective, you might say like, hey, those are some positive trends that could lead to good things down the road. As a father, when you look out 10 years from now or 15 years from now, when your kids are adults, how do you view where we're headed? Where do you think we're going to be 10, 15 years from now when it comes to these sets of issues that we're engaging in so fervently right now? Do you feel like we're headed? I guess I won't answer for you. Where are we headed?
Yeah. Oh man, I don't know. I feel like that's like, I like there, I feel like I'm like failing as a social influencer with admitting uncertainty. I think that if I had to sort of predict, I think we're going to have to deal with, it, like as an angler. I mean, right. What is it? The Bitterroot was like almost dry last year. Is that right? The Bitterroot River? What?
There were a number of the Jefferson, Big Hole. Those ones had a lot of water issues.
And so we're going through this, and like we're going through it with fire. We're going through it with all these things. Like there are like big issues happening with the places we care for. Like regardless of like extraction or whatever, like the reality is like we're gonna have to work together, and we're gonna have to kind of like figure it out because it's all interconnected. Frankly put, like, man, the fires in LA have an impact on someone who's living in the sort of like outskirts of town in a rural place, their ability to get insurance. Like it's all interconnected and all interwoven. And I do think that there is a reality of like, I think that's becoming clearer, is that there's actually fewer divides between where you live and where I live. And we want pretty similar things. Like we want our kids to have a better life. We want our kids to have a good education. We probably, we don't want our houses to burn down, and we want to be able to have places where we don't have to worry, like where we get to experience joy and we get to experience connection to the natural world, to something greater beyond us. Like there's a lot I think there's going to be a lot that brings us to the table. And my hope is that when we come to the table, we can set aside the things we like maybe disagree on and like think about the things that we do agree on and that we do share. And sometimes that collaboration, it's hard to create, like we said, it's like you have to start there. You have to talk, you first start with talking, then you have to go to action, right? And I think the reality is that sometimes you also just get pulled to the table because of necessity. And I do think that in the coming years, like I think that will become more of a reality, is that we get pulled to the table because of necessity. And that my hope would be that when we do that, we're able to kind of like figure out what are our shared beliefs and our shared concerns. Like, I think about Maslow's needs a lot and like where that is and like where we all fit in that. And then maybe for like, it's not to say forget about it. It's like, different things mean different things to different people, but at least in that setting is that we can like focus on what we share and less about, it's like, we're never going to be mirror images of each other as people. It's just like, won't happen. Shouldn't be the expectation. But when that time comes, we remember that is that there's like wonder and strength in being different. And that's my hope. And I do think we're like it or not, I think we're going to be heading in that direction. And I think maybe it's already happened, right? Like I really too hope that the Mike Lee moment wasn't a high water mark, that it is like something that we can look back on and say like, what happened there? Take it apart, examine it, and then figure out how to repeat it again and again and again. And then I think if we do that, I think we have a shot at like making sure that our kids get to experience something similar. It won't be the same because the world's always changing, but like maybe they get to find that same joy, that same connection, that same moment of being like, do I want to have a kid? Do I want to share this with the next generation? Is this something like they imagine taking their kid out and feeling the cold of a river, or they take their kid out and imagine their kid experiencing that quietness of sitting behind a duck blind, the same way that like I hope my kids like kind of get to understand and interact with risk, fear through climbing, that they get to hear like the whisper of like perfect snow sliding across skis. Like that's what I hope. And I think that if we come to the table and we accept that there are differences, I think we'll help that younger generation beget the next younger generation, and so forth and so forth. And I think that's my hope. And that may sound like a pipe dream, but I do think it's possible. And I think it's like when that moment, when we like get called in because of the realities that are facing us, that we accept that and that we come prepared to listen and also share.
Yeah. I'm right there with you, Fitz. I think that's possible. And I think that will be our route to a better future and to a future where our kids have those opportunities. So I appreciate you sharing that. I appreciate you sharing all of this and for leading for so many years through your platforms, through sharing your experiences, through how you've inspired audiences to engage with the natural world, to explore, to experience it. Because I think, we talked about this earlier. At the beginning of any pathway to becoming an advocate must be a connection to nature, to public lands. None of this happens unless you have that experience, that connection, and that love. And you've done a great job of helping inspire and encourage that for so many people. So thank you, Fitz.
Thanks for saying that. Yeah. No, like one thing, it's like funny. Like I just sort of remember that. It's like, I remember, having done the podcast, like you all have done the same. Like the Meat Eater is like, I remember that being like, I can't remember when Steve started the Meat Eater, like what year it was exactly, but I was like, oh, what's this? Oh, this is really interesting because there weren't that many of us at that moment in time. Right. And I remember listening to that, and then I remember seeing like kind of like the beginning. I mean, I feel like it was sort of early in the streaming thing, like the Meat Eater television show.
Yep.
And I remember like sitting down and be like, I should watch this. I should watch this and listen. I remember watching the Meat Eater and being like, this is the same thing I'm doing. Like, it's the same exact thing. Like, we share so many of the same values here, and it just is different. It's like replace well, there's even mountains. The whole thing about it is there's tons of mountains in both,
so
right?
Similar, yeah.
It's so similar. It's like replace like moving very fast with a helmet on and moving very slowly with intention, and it's the same thing. So yeah, you all have done a great job too, and I appreciate it. And I appreciate for the people listening in that community, like I appreciate what the hunting and angling community has done, and I think you've been a good role model and a good for us to like look towards, and I'm appreciative of that, and I hope we can kind of just build strength together.
Yeah, that's what I'm excited about. I'm excited about this being one of the next steps towards further collaboration, towards more work together, and it's been great to see this build since last year, and I'm excited about where it's headed. So let's make a point to check back in on this some handful of years down the road, Fitz, and
Yeah.
hopefully we'll be celebrating a
Yeah.
bunch more of these projects together, collaborations between our community, and good outcomes
Yeah.
for wildlife and wild places.
Yeah. And I'll extend the invitation back if you ever want to go climbing, or I mean, I know you do climb, so I don't mean to say it, but like same thing. Let's meet up and like figure out a way to do that. So that'd be good.
That sounds great. To say I climb is very kind of you. I am learning to climb with kids, kind of like you said, your kids are like trying to get you to do the bigger jumps and everything.
Yeah.
I've got a son who wants me to really figure this climbing thing out because he's very into it. So I'll take the guidance I can get. I'll take you up on that someday.
Cool. Awesome.
All right.
Well, thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Fitz.
Appreciate it.